learning to code is still the fastest and most reliable way for normal average people to go from zero to making $10,000 a month. And I know you might disagree with that statement. You might be like,
oh, but the job market is really difficult right now.
Oh, but isn't coding dead already? But
what if I told you that it is still actually more possible than ever to go from zero to making $10,000 a month with coding because of some very new opportunities that you never even had before. And if you take these opportunities now, then you can get ahead of people that aren't aware of these opportunities. And what's even better is that with coding, you have options. There is more than one path to get into $10,000 a month with coding. And we'll get back to these options in a moment. But in this video, I wanted to really talk about what would be the exact path that I would personally take from zero if I was starting over and I wanted to get to $10,000 a month with just my coding skills as fast as possible. Because while I've obviously done it before, what I would do today might be slightly different to what I would have done in the past. And I'll also tell you exactly how you can follow these exact steps as well and get there. And it doesn't matter whether you're not smart or whether you've been to university or anything like that. But before we can talk about what I would do, we need to talk about what I absolutely do not do, and that is university. Okay, so hear me out. What if I told you that there was an online course out there that takes you 4 years to complete? It costs $150,000 on average, and it teaches, number one, outdated information, number two, theory that you will never actually use in the real world, and number three, it gives you 0 practical skills that you can actually use in the real world. And on top of that, what if I told you that this course was taught by outdated old professors who haven't been in the real world for 30 years or something like that? If I pitched this to you, you would think that that's the biggest scam in the entire universe. Yet still somehow we have managed to convince ourselves that this is the path that you're just supposed to take. But if there's one thing that's in common with all the people that I personally know that make a truckload of money, is that they all understand when things have changed and they know how to look into the future and find the best deal based on current information, not what might have worked for the previous generation or something like that, which is the case with university. So your first step to $10,000 a month with coding is going to be to land your first job. And in the past, university was the best way to do that, but nowadays it simply isn't. Okay, so if we're not going to go to university, what should you do instead? Well, obviously you have a plethora of options. You have YouTube channels like my YouTube channel where you can learn the basics for free and get yourself started. But if you really want to take this seriously, you're probably going to be looking for something slightly more premium than that can get you through the entire process from zero to learning all the practical programming skills that you actually need in the real world. And what you're probably also looking for is support in the area of actually landing the job. Like university and most courses out there don't offer anything in this area. And that is why I've partnered with Course Careers that I think have the best, most premium offer out there when it comes to taking any average person from zero to landing their first 70K plus job as a software engineer in as little as 12 weeks. So what you get with Course Careers is not just an online course. I mean, you get an online course, but basically they first take you through all the foundations of software development, and the course is taught by Tech with Tim, another famous tech YouTuber who you might be aware of. And then after that, you can choose a specialization, either front-end, back-end, or DevOps based on what you want to specialize in. And again, all these specializations are going to be taught by someone who is specialized in that area. And what's really cool about them is that after you go through the program, you also get added to their employer platform, which is essentially a place that employers are going to be looking at directly and handpick interview candidates from there. So because you now have the proof that you have the skills from having completed Course Careers, and Course Careers verifies this for them, they are going to know that you have the skills needed. And this is why some of the top students are now securing job offers without even applying for any jobs directly. What they can offer is something that no other service out there is able to offer, and that is why I have now become an official partner with them, where if you enroll using my link down below, you can get a $50 discount on the program, and you can get started with their free introductory course to software development. So you can check out the free course where already you're honestly getting a lot of value that normally you would have to pay for with a lot of other courses. After that, you're going to be able to choose a coach to essentially offer you additional support as you go through this program. And I'm going to be offering myself as one of these coaches that you're going to be able to select afterwards if you want to get direct support from me as well as you go through the Course Careers curriculum. So you can click my link down below to sign up and take that free course. And remember, Remember that link also gives you a special $50 discount, which I am able to offer to you as a partner of Course Careers. And with that, now that we have your first job taken care of, let's move on to the next step, which will take you up to $10,000 a month. So next, let's talk about how we can then increase our income from here to get to $10,000 a month as fast as possible. And here is where these options come in, because there's broadly two kinds of paths to make a really lucrative career with coding. So next, let's talk about these paths and which one of them might be right for you. And this brings us into the first path of increasing your income to $10,000 a month, and that is going to be the employed path. And specifically, the way you increase your income is not by being a good boy and just climbing the corporate ladder or something like that. There's been so many studies that the best way to increase your income as an employee is to switch jobs every around 2 to 3 years, I believe is the optimum from all of these studies. And again, these companies will sort of guilt you into thinking like, oh, but you need to be loyal. But the thing is, they are not going to be loyal to you when it comes to it. So you have no obligation to be loyal to them either. It's a business transaction. You are providing employment for them in return for compensation. And the thing with jobs is that really the bigger part of your compensation, especially in the beginning stages of your career, should be what you're learning from that job, not even necessarily what you get in terms of pay. Because in your first jobs, your pay is simply not going to be as high as you'd want it to be. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take the job. Like my first job paid pretty terribly because all jobs in London seem to pay terribly relative to the cost of living. But what I did take away from that job was the learning and everything I could extract from it in terms of the new skills I was gaining. Don't let the company use you, use the company. And if you do that as a software engineer, if you are in a country or you're able to work in a country that has super high salaries, like US, Switzerland, for example, then you can have a very, very lucrative career as just an employee. But let's say you don't live in a country like that. Let's say you are based in India and you don't have any way of getting a work visa in the US. For these kinds of people, or for the kinds of people who just don't want to work the sort of 9-to-5 life, you want to do something of your own, then you have the entrepreneur path, which is what I have personally chosen. And this is obviously going to depend on exactly what you want to do, but there's many ways to use the skill of coding to start a business. The first of it is going to be the obvious one, which is to code a tech startup, but actually this is like the last business that I would probably recommend for beginners. So many of you might know this, but I had a tech startup like around last year that we built, we finished the app, we launched it, everything was going great. But then eventually it actually didn't end up working out. And I don't believe I've talked about this before, but essentially we decided to shut down the startup because it just didn't have quite the potential that I wanted it to have. And compared to my other business, it was not really a good use of my time to do that. Now, obviously for me, this was fine because I was covered financially from the other business I have. But the reason I would not recommend a startup for beginners is that, like, realistically, most of them are going to fail. Like 99% of startups are going to fail without you making anything from that startup. And the thing is, if you go through like the traditional like VC funded startup route, what's really going to happen is that you're going to take on a lot of funding from some venture capitalists if you're lucky enough to get that. And then these venture capitalists will essentially expect you to work for like 5 to 7 years on this startup while taking very minimal pay for yourself from that company, because you're supposed to like just invest in the company and grow the company as fast as possible, which I of course understand. But for a beginner, if you're broke and you don't already have another income source, or you don't already have a lot of money from some magical source, this is not going to be a very, very fun time. And even after those 5 to 7 years, it's still probably going to fail. So I would never recommend a startup like this for beginners. And I learned this the hard way myself. What I would recommend is what's called a cash flow business. So you can absolutely build an app that solves some kind of problem. Let's say you happen to have domain knowledge in, let's say, real estate, and you find that there's some platform that should really exist between like the agents and like the people renting apartments in your country, and you decide to build it. Great, amazing. Do that, but try to get it to earn money as fast as possible. And the way you do that is that you build something called an MVP. You build the simplest possible version of that application or whatever you're building, or a website that solves the core problem that you're trying to solve. Rather than obsessing about like making the perfect platform in the world, just make the simplest possible platform in the world. Just try to get a couple of customers in there in terms of the letting side, and then just try to see if you can get any sort of traction for this application. And if you can't get any traction, you just be brutal and shut that app down and start something new. This is what allows you to like try different things very, very quickly and not end up spending like 2 years working on something that will never actually end up working out. And through this, it will probably take you a couple of attempts. And by the way, I would probably do this while you still have your 9-to-5 job. Eventually, you will find something that clicks. And the thing about entrepreneurship, which is a positive of this path, is that when it works, it can really work and it can really grow very quickly. My first business I started working out, I was working on it for a full year and I made $0. But when it started working out and when it started going up, I went from $0 to $10,000 a month in just like, I think it was 4 months or 5 months or something like that. That is not something that is going to happen with the job path. You're going to have your salary and then you're just going to have like small incremental increases to that salary, and you're going to have to work for a very long time to get to very high incomes. But obviously the positive of the job path is that it's going to be more reliable, although again the company can fire you at any point, so it's not actually as reliable as people think. But there's going to be pros and cons with these different paths. And there's of course many other kinds of businesses you can start. You can start an agency where you just build websites for some clients or applications in whatever domain you're specialized in. And then eventually you hire some other people or contractors to do the work for you. And now your job is just to get as many clients as possible. Then you hire out the work to a subcontractor you have. And then you just pocket the difference between what you charge and what you're paying that contractor to deliver that service. That's one possibility. You could start content creation like what I've done here. You could specialize in some very niche area of programming and just become sort of the mobile development guy or the blockchain development guy or whatever you specialize in. Of course, you can also do a more general channel like what I have. There's obviously going to be a lot more competition in this space. But outside of these two paths, there's actually one third path that I didn't tell you about before that actually sort of gets the best of both of these worlds, from the stability of having the 9-to-5 job and the freedom of the entrepreneur path. And that is going to be freelancing. So when I talk about freelancing, I'm not talking about like going to Upwork or something like that. I'm talking about just finding businesses who need websites, for example, and rather than you applying to them to work for them as an employee, you apply to them as something called a contractor, where essentially they're simply paying you to deliver them some kind of work. And often these bigger companies, they're going to have teams of contractors to build some specific project that they want to build. This is great for the companies because they don't have to go through the process of hiring you full time. And this is great for you because these contractor jobs often pay significantly more than employed jobs, because you as the contractor have the added risk of not having the stability of that employment contract. But what you can do with this is have multiple clients at the same time, and because you're getting paid a lot more per hour or per month, you can really increase your income much faster than you can by having a job. And honestly, if I was starting over, this is probably the path I would choose. I would first land a job as fast as possible. I don't even care what it pays at this point because I'm just doing it for the learning and for the credibility. And then after like a year or two, I would start applying for freelancing positions as much as I possibly can. And through that, I would probably very easily get my income to $10,000 a month. And then from there, I would start building out apps on the side. I would maybe start creating content again. And eventually, when these apps and this content perhaps surpasses my freelancing income, I can do that full time. That would be the exact step-by-step path that I would follow personally. But obviously what makes sense for you depends on you, what you want, your personality, everything like this. But I really hope that this has been helpful to you. Of course, beyond that, you're gonna get into more advanced stuff like how to actually use this income to build wealth as fast as possible, how to invest it, how to really grow the income even more. But those topics are beyond the scope of this video, and I actually already made a video like this where I talk about the wealth building strategies that all programmers really should know, because you can make a lot of money with coding, but if you don't know what to do with that money, you might still end up broke. So if you don't want that to happen to you, go watch this video next and I will see you there.